Hello, welcome to Making Photos. I'm Ian Butterfield. Details are so important in our photography. They add a lot of flavour, they help you explore your subject. I covered this whole topic in a live stream some weeks back now, so let's join the live stream as I give you some advice on detail photography. Details, details, details. The devil is in the detail and all that. I think it's a bit of an overlooked topic when it comes to photography. As I was preparing for this, I had a flick through my reference books to see whether I could find any sections on detail photography. And it's not in there. Now, that might be because maybe I'm looking up under the wrong word, because what I mean by detail is not necessarily what everybody else means. But what I'm going to be talking about, I think, is important to our photography, and I think is something that is worth spending some time on. But let me define what I actually mean by details, first of all. A detail image is not a macro image per se. So don't get confused by thinking, oh, talking details, we're talking macro. We're not. A detail image can be a macro image, but it doesn't have to be. And a lot of the time it isn't. As you'll see with the examples that I show, they're definitely not macro shots. What do I mean by detail? Well, I mean a portion, a subset of a larger subject. That's what I mean by a detail. And you'll see with the examples that it becomes a bit more obvious as we go through what that's all about. So, for example, this image over my shoulder is a detail shot. It's a window in Rome. It's a subset of a larger scene, which is a building. So it's just one detail from a building. Definitely not a macro shot. And I was going to say I couldn't take it with a macro lens. I might actually, because I suspect I was probably around the 100mm zoom level when I took it. But it's not a macro shot at all, but it is a detail shot. So, why are details important? They're important because they enable us to see things which we may otherwise miss in photos. And sometimes this can be about putting together a series of images to enable somebody to see the subject properly. So let's have a look at this case study I've got, which is a stained glass window. And I think I've probably got the name spelt incorrectly here. But this is a stained glass window in the church in Stockport. It's based on the iconic The Light of the World painting by Holman Hunt. I'm not sure whether I've spelt his name correctly, so my apologies if I got that one wrong on there. But there's so much detail in there. I mean, have a good look at it. And look at the detail in it. Well, I think there's lots of different compositions in there, and I think possibly, even though you're looking at this image while I'm talking, and I'm padding slightly because I really do want to give you time to look at this image and to cast your eye around it, because I want to do a little bit of an experiment here. Because from that one image, which you could argue is a detail from a church, but that's the full image. What I'm talking about are the details from that shot. Now, these are all separate photos. So maybe the first thing that your eye went to when you were looking at the details of this shot was the face of Jesus on there. Maybe your eye was drawn to that because it's one of the brightest areas of the image, and the eye is always drawn to the bright parts of an image. Was that the first thing that you saw? Maybe on there. But did you see that the crown is actually two crowns? It's the kingly crown of Jesus intertwined with the crown of thorns from the crucifixion. Possibly something that you missed when looking at the whole image, but something that you can see now because we're just looking at one detail from it, one section of it. The main concept behind this image is it's all about Jesus saying, I stand at the door and knock. It's about Jesus knocking on the door of your life. So the hand is important, and we've got the hand there knocking with the knuckles. And it's interesting, it's knocking that way as opposed to knocking that way. It's a gentle knock, isn't it? Again, that comes out from the detail on there. The hand's significant to it. So photographing the detail helps us tell that story. And one other detail there, did you notice the mark of the nails in his palm? Probably not on the full image, but because we're looking at just one section of it, maybe you spotted it on there. And what about the lantern that he's holding, the light of the world part? Was your eye drawn to the bright blue in the lantern? But did you notice the candle just hidden behind the slats in there? Again, as we come in close, you can see more detail, and it helps you explore this single subject of this one painted glass window. But when we looked at it, and even that close-up of just the hand holding the lantern, did you spot the chain wrapped around Jesus' hand and the detail in there of how that's all put together, how it's wrapped firmly around the wrist and held in the fingers on it? So having those detail shots enable us to go through a journey on an image. So it's easier to do that by photographing each part of it separately, each of those details in there, to be able to see the whole thing, as it were, in more detail on there. Yes, I could have probably cropped in, but the challenge is to make the composition, and those compositions were all made in camera. Each section of that was a separate shot on there. So details, another one here, can sometimes tell the story far better than the full scene. So let's have a look at another little case study. This time it's cars in Havana and how details help us tell the story of the vehicles in Havana. As you probably know, the vehicles in Havana tend to be 1950s style. Some of them actually have modern engines in, but they're all 1950s Americana type cars. Chevrolets like this. So while I was there, I photographed a lot of the details on the cars, like the iconic tail fins on the Chevrolets and the tail lights on there, and that's sort of iconic of those cars. And immediately you see that, you think 1950s Americana cars. And again, the figurine on the front here, we've got this flying bird on there. I think is it a Thunderbird? I'm not sure on that with that shot. But again, the detail and the wing mirror just in shot there helps tell the story of what type of car it is, and the pink coming from it. And I was going to say the radiator grille, the fender, if you're an American. Sorry to any Americans watching for the accent on there. But looking at the front, the badge on there, the grille, the number plate, it's all part of telling the story of it. Now, is that better than trying to photograph the cars? Well, the best I could do when I photographed the car, those three cars, was that in a line. And I don't think that tells the story as well as just doing it through the details on there, because I couldn't get to a point where I could see them from the front. You could just about see the Chevrolet rear light on there, but it's tiny, whereas just going in and getting the individual details on there makes for a much better shot, and it's more interesting to the viewer done that way. So what else about details? Well, details can give us an alternative perspective, perhaps on something that we know really well, and photographing it just as a detail from it can help us see it in a new light. So here's a case study. I'm not going to name what it is, and see if you can, well, I know you'll know what it is as soon as I put it up on the screen. So there, I'm certain you can recognize the object, but how often do we see it from that point of view? That gives you a totally new perspective, because what I focused in on is one detail, the ponytail and the hieroglyphs on the back of the mask. And for anyone who hasn't worked it out yet, shame on you, then that's what it is. It's the death mask of King Tutankhamun in Cairo Museum. So the details help us see things in a new light. Details can sometimes be the only thing that we actually need to know exactly what we're looking at. Here's another case study. Not going to name it, because you'll know what it is as soon as I put it on the screen. If you're in the UK, this is iconic. You will recognise what it is from just this small detail of it. But it creates an interesting abstract, and it allows us to concentrate and to focus in as a viewer on how this structure is made, and the ribs on there, the wing, as it were, of, well, the Angel of the North in Gateshead on there. So just thinking about details as a way of telling that story. I'm sure you worked out what it was. Another thing about details, and why I encourage them, is because they can be used as flavour shots, either in travel guides or in larger presentations. So here's a case study from a trip to Jordan. Just detail from, again, something iconic. You almost certainly will recognise it. It's a detail from a well-known landmark, but it's only part of it. It's not what we normally see, but this is the sort of thing you might see in the margin of a travel book, a travel brochure on there. And it just adds a flavour to the location. So yeah, this one, if you haven't worked it out, is the treasury in Jordan, in Petra in Jordan. And you can see now, it's the top section of it. Maybe I could have gone in closer. In fact, I have got closer bits, but I just chose that one section to show, because there's one quite interesting thing on there. Did you spot it? You probably did. The fact that the figure has been chipped away on it, which you possibly don't notice so much when you look at the larger vista of it, the larger view. And sometimes details are needed to help us remember particular things. And there are things which will get forgotten if we don't photograph them. And this is something I always mention when I'm talking about wedding photography, and how photographing the details are really, really important. Little things like the detail on the front of the wedding car, and how the ribbons were attached, if there were ribbons attached to it. There's so much going on at a wedding that the bride and the groom often don't get the chance to see all these little bits and pieces. The detail on the front of the car, the bouquet. Yes, the bride's holding it all day, but the groom, if he's looking at the bouquet on his wedding day, there's something seriously going wrong. He'll be looking at his bride, and everybody's looking at the bride, not the bouquet. And I mean, just think now to the last wedding that you attended. Can you remember what the bouquet looked like? the bouquet of flowers. So getting a shot of it helps everyone to remember that detail of the day that might have been forgotten. And the cake. Now, this is a really, really important one. A lot of work goes into producing wedding cakes. And what happens to them? Halfway through the day, somebody attacks it with a knife or a machete and cuts it into pieces. So get the photos of it. What did it look like? What were the figures on top? Sometimes the figures on top are edible. So that information is lost. The other thing to say about details is they can be a composition in their own right. So here's an example from a place called Septiil in Canada. Here's the full scene on there. I wonder if you can work out or spot what the detail is on the shot. What detail is there in there that would make for a good composition? Did you spot the composition in there? Let me make sure. Yeah, there. That's what I think is an interesting little composition from it. It's a nice abstract shape on it. We've got circles, we've got triangles, we've got lines, we've got diagonals on there. And it's just a detail from that location. It's not a detail from the original shot. It's a shot in its own right. I photographed from closer into the church to get the shot. But what I'm saying is you can use details to create your own compositions. And sometimes details are all you need to tell the story. So here we go in Havana, one of my favorite detail shots. Back to Havana. It's just a detail of the wing mirror from a Chevrolet, but because that detail has the reflection as well, and yet you can still see the shape of the car, I think this tells the whole story in a detail about the type of car, the look of it. You even get the hint of the streets within that detail. So sometimes the detail can be just so powerful. I hope you found that useful. I'd love to see your detail shots. So if you've created any or have been inspired to create them through watching this video, please upload them to my Facebook group. The link's down below, and I'll give you some feedback on them. If you want to learn more techniques and more ways to improve your photography, there's a playlist on the screen of some great videos which will help you, and the one down here I particularly recommend. Go and take a look at it now. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and keep making great photos. Bye for now.